carnal, dice mi gente, la raza está abajo y tú estás indiferente. Prefieres cerrar los ojos, no vi nada. Estabas ocupado por andar en la tomada. Te gusta tirar el cruising todo el día, buscando a las mujeres como si el mundo acabaría. Pero no sabías que tú podías continuar tu educación para superarte en la vida. Hermano joven, levanta tu frente y siente el orgullo de ser un descendiente de los aztecas, los incas y los mayas. Ayúdame a pelear y vencer.
Antonio Díaz con su programa de Mestizo Experience. Hoy estamos en el mes de febrero y acaba de pasar el Tratado de Guadalupe Hidalgo, que como ustedes, los que me conocen, saben que yo he hecho foros para discutir cómo sucedió ese tratado, que actualmente es un robo, ¿no? Porque México estaba muy débil en esos tiempos. Estaba peleando por muchas fronteras contra los franceses, los ingleses, los Estados Unidos, con España. Solo que es como los Estados Unidos le robó las tierras a México y ahora los mexicanos son ilegales en las tierras ancestrales de ellos. Yo digo ancestrales porque no nomás que aquí era Nueva España, porque España invadió desde 1492 hasta entonces, que fue 1846, pero esta gente mexicana, que muchas naciones indígenas en México perdieron su identidad indígena y fueron llamados españoles de España Nueva, aunque tenían esa casta, ¿no? Que si peninsulares, mestizos, indios, ¿verdad? Solo que es lo que todavía existe en México, pero por eso los usaron. Yo hasta les he dicho la historia de Cuauhtémoc, cuando Cuauhtémoc perdió la batalla en Tenochtitlán en contra de Cortés. Tan pronto que lo tomaron prisionero, lo llamaron luego ciudadano de España y en servicio del rey de España. Y por eso, así como cuando al fin lo mataron que iba sido traicionero en contra del rey de España, aunque era un rey, un tlautuani de la gente mexica. Así como lo trataron, así como nos han tratado a nosotros desde entonces hasta hoy, ¿no? Solo que el robo ese con el Tratado de Guadalupe Hidalgo le ha robado todavía más los derechos a las tierras ancestrales a las gentes mexicanas, ¿verdad? Y es la lucha. Bueno, what I've been saying is, I'm televising today, even though it's the 13th of February, we went through the February the 2nd, which is the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which of course we know is a land theft that the United States perpetrated against Mexico by invading it in 1846. Even though this, what you call the state of Texas, called itself the Republic of Texas in 1836, which Mexico did not recognize. So when they declared that U.S. citizens had been killed on U.S. soil, that was false. Mexico had never recognized the Republic of Texas, which we all know was a slave nation, even by its own constitution. If you look at the Constitution of the Republic of Texas, you will see how it was constructed, instituted to maintain slavery, right? So it's been white supremacy and an invasion over non-white territory and enslavement of non-whites throughout. So I will put this out to you. When Mexico had to give up its territories, it was because it was so weak. It was fighting on so many fronts against the French, against the Spanish, against the English, against the United States. I think even Russians were in there trying to take all the resources from Mexico. And I bring up this fact that almost all the soldiers that were fighting for New Spain or for the Mexican Republic that had existed since 1821, these were indigenous people that were called nationalized into New Spain and then nationalized into the Mexican Republic by the Spaniards, right? And I bring up the case of the leader, the last king of the Mexica in Tenochtitlan, which is now recognized as Mexico City, right? Because they built that city right on top of the capital city of the Mexica, which is where Mexico derives its name from, right? You get it? They built it right on top of it. Just like they built the cathedral right on top of the shrines of Quetzalcoatl and Huitzilopochtli, Tlaloc, all the deities that the Mexica prayed to. They built the shrine to the Virgen de Guadalupe, which now all indigenous people pray to, right on the where they used to pray to Tonantzin. Tonantzin is the female Mother Earth. So the natives still, the instinct is to go there, right? To have the pilgrimage there. The Spaniards were very, very, very astute, very, very astute as far as being able to colonize our indigenous people. And so is the United States. Because now, since they did that theft by invading and defeating a very weak, very, very low, I mean, they had muskets and they were fighting with stones, with against military, with cannons, pretty much the way the Indians fought the Spaniards, right? When they tried to, and they could have defeated them except for diseases. Well, the Mexicans at that time could not defeat the U.S. troops that had far superior weapons, cannons and everything. And even to the point where you see the heroes of Chapultepec were kids, 12, 13-year-old kids that refused to give up and jumped off of the tower from Chapultepec. So they're called the heroes, los héroes. But the United States, it's in its invasion, took over half, about 55 to 60% of the northern territories that Mexico declared as Mexico. And in doing so now, Mexicans that cross the river, that was not an international border, either to Mexicans or to indigenous people. Now they're called illegals. Now we are illegals. And I've said this time and time again, we live under apartheid. We live under an apartheid system. Not just segregation, that we lived through segregation as well. Because it was not, segregation, Jim Crow laws were not just employed against blacks, but they were employed against non-whites. Here in San Antonio, we had our own schools. We had our own theaters. El Nacional, La Alameda, all these were just Spanish-speaking Mexican theaters because we were not allowed to go into the whites' theaters, just like the blacks. Okay? But now this oppression continues against us. The blacks are nationalized if they're citizens, right? We are not. And we're just across the river. And we have family ties, blood ties. Even though most of us don't cross over there anymore, because either our aunts, uncles, great uncles have passed away, and because of that attrition of crossing and being treated in the manner that you're treated, the United States used to give what they called kerosene baths, delousing baths to Mexicans that crossed the border back in the 1920s, 1930s. So to go through all that, just to go see family, come back, is something that we have to put up with. Now what we have to put up with is seeing Central and South Americans that also are related to Mexicans being put in prison, being called gang members and everything else, even though we know that the main reason that drugs exist is because of the United States consumption. And not just United States consumption, but the United States incorporation of it and exportation of it. In the United States is the main seller. Comes here, and then it's sold. Because if you go to Afghanistan, where the poppies are grown right now, yeah, they show you, those people will sell you a kilo for like $20, $30 there, raw. Or even if they turn it into heroin, still not worth very much. It's not until it gets into the hands of the English, French, or United States that then the price skyrockets into millions. This is still colonization. We have to fight against it We will fight against it. We've been fighting against it, at least on personal level, now for close to 30 years. And why I use the word indigenous for myself as a self-identification, as a right of self-determination, fighting colonialism. Right? This city of San Antonio is marking its 300th year of colonization, and it's celebrating it, right? And most of the people here that have indigenous blood don't understand that they are descendants of the colonized, of the ones that survived, right? Because many, many died. And there are cemeteries all around each mission that is being touted again. It's a World Heritage Site. And why this big push, 300th year of colonization, the revamping of what they call the Alamo, even though it was a mission, Béjar de Valero, named after some viceroy from Spain, who probably never even saw it. But again, it's how the theft was done. And we're here celebrating this, celebrating 300 years of it, even though the official year, which is why I start my marches. You start my marches for Indigenous Dignity Day out of Columbus Park. Columbus Park, before it was cut up the way the area is cut up now, of 35 and 90 and 10 west going that way, was all continuous land. It had an acequia, but that acequia was coming from San Pedro Creek. And that's where they built the first, or tried to build the first mission. But they didn't build it out of rocks, mortar, and things. They built it less sturdy, and during a thunderstorm, it knocked it all down. And that's why they rebuilt where it is today, where it's called the Alamo now, by Alamo Plaza. But you still have an acequia that runs through there, even though they've shut it down. It's called the Madre Acequia, and that comes from the headwaters of Yanaguana, right? Why you call Yanaguana, where we gathered by our sacred waters, our land. We're supposed to celebrate being colonized and no longer remember these things I'm telling you about what we called our water, what we called the land right next to it, and how it was stolen, how our identity is stolen. We're all just supposed to get drunk and party and celebrate that we descendants, or those of us that remain, because our land, our area keeps being infused. I use this word of diversity by diverse cultures. So they're becoming more dominant. So they don't care about how we were colonized as long as they're celebrating something and they can show their artwork and different diverse things. We're supposed to just be quiet and accept it as long as the city's making money. Well, I will keep on talking about it until I can't anymore, because it's a wrong. It's a wrong that needs to be righted. These things need to stop. How can a country that says it's a new land and developed out of democracy and some different foundations, even though we know it's just for white privilege, the whites owned everything, even though they came over here with nothing, somehow they owned all our land because they were white Christians, white Catholics like Spaniards. It's wrong. How can you call yourself someone that fights for freedom and democracy and everything else all around the globe, but really what you're doing is imposing your military might in order to be able to extract those resources from those poor people in those lands, the way it was done to us here, the way it was done here, and the way how they maintain their stranglehold over us. And the proof is that they keep celebrating how they colonized us. This is associated with it, workers' rights, because if once Mexicans were treated as illegals, then they needed guest worker permits to come and work the lands that once used to belong to them, to their grandfathers, whatever. They're the ones that had all the farms along the border that were taken over by the whites. And the new farms that started growing grapes and all that. Once they became guest workers, and as we know the progression of the different wars, more labor was needed, especially once slavery was ended, even though we know that Jim Crow still suppressed the rights of black people, forcing them to work almost as slaves still, pennies in the dollars compared to the whites. But they still wanted really cheap labor, and that was the Mexicans, us, the original owners of this land, the original people from here, treated as foreigners, slaves, today criminals. In the 60s, in California and here in Texas, here in the Southwest, there was a push to unionize agricultural workers, farm workers, the ones that still didn't have any rights. And it was done by different factions. The Filipinos did it in California, and then started with the Mexican Americans under Cesar Chavez, and here in Texas by Antonio Orendain. We did something here in San Antonio. As I've said before, I grew up as a migrant farm worker. I was born in the fields, actually, returning from the norte, as my grandfather and uncles and aunts and my mother used to call it. Fuimos al norte, a los trabajos. We went to the north to find work, and there was farm work. And I didn't make it back into San Antonio, so I was born in the truck. Which is why I really wanted to recognize the leaders of the farm workers movement. Not for myself, but to continue helping as we did at first, while I was a part of what I created as a founder, which was the Cesar Chavez March for Justice here in San Antonio back in 1996. I started that with that in mind, to honor the leadership of the farm workers. At that time, I did not know too much about Antonio Orendain as I do now. And I know he's the forgotten one, pretty much as I am, right? Two Antonios. I'm forgotten as being the co-founder, along with Mr. Martinez, of this march, as giving up 13 years of my life to organize and direct the march. I was the director of the march up until 2008. That's when the other person now, Gabriel Velasquez, named himself the director. And Mr. Martinez did not defend my position, even though I defended his position to be the chairman of the march. Gabriel simply signed the permits. Jaime allowed it, asked me to allow it, which I grudgingly did. But that's all he did. He was not the director of the march. He had very little input until 2009, after I was ostracized. Well, I came back to the march last year, 2017, as a candidate for mayor. And I reminded everybody that I'm the co-founder of the march, which is why I could move freely throughout that march. You have two marches now coming up. Two. One by the son of Jaime Martinez, who truly did not become active maybe till about 2003, 2004, and had very sparse appearances up until after 2009 as well. Then he became truly active in it. And if his father wanted to give him, will to him, the Legacy and Education Foundation, which Jaime started, that he did start on his own. You know, I was a board member to begin with, but that's Jaime's. He could name whoever he wanted to as VP, Gabriel or Ernie or whoever, which he did, right? So Ernest has the right to take that over, but he does not have the march because he was not even around. And Gabriel didn't come around until 1998. He wrote down that he was there in 1997. Our first march was in 1997. He was not there. We did not meet Gabriel until October of 1997. See, and the march was in March of 1997. we did not meet Gabriel until October of 1997 in Austin, as he was putting together his reconciliation effort at the main library, which he did, recognizing the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo on February 2nd at the main library. This is for you, Gabriel. Make some memories, son. You weren't there in 1997, even though you wrote on your website that you've been director of the march since 1997 to now. That's false. And you were not director of the march until 2009, after you took my place. Took it, because I didn't give it to you. Took it. We allowed you to sign the permits. We didn't give you the march. The city or legalities or whatever might say that because you signed those permits, you own that march. Well, I guess that's why Ernest had to start a new one, right? And you keep that one. But I am the founder of the Cesar E. Chavez March for Justice in San Antonio. And as such, I'm inviting everybody else. I also have a permit for a march, so there will be three marches. And mine is also for March the 31st. But Gabriel will go in the morning because he already made a deal with the city to go in the morning. I will go in the afternoon. And I will keep much of the original route. The only change will be when we get to downtown, we're coming up Houston to Alamo Plaza where we ended it. And the reason for that is I already went over in the beginning. That land was stolen from us to begin with. The Mexicans that died wearing Spanish uniform or Mexican Republic uniform were indigenous people that were left there in heaps, dead. What you all celebrate as a fiesta, which is coming up, is a defeat of Mexicans at the river of San Joaquin. The Battle of San Joaquin, or San Jacinto, San Jacinto was the defeat of Mexicans, and it's celebrated here. They're not celebrating the Alamo. They want to do that, but they were defeated by the Mexicans here in Alamo, here at La Misión de Béjar de Valero. It was not until the Battle of San Jacinto, the river of San Jacinto, where Sam Houston's forces defeated the Mexicans. And that's what's celebrated during Fiesta. We're celebrating that we lost our land. And whoever wants to say they're Tejanos, again, and I want to tell you this, the Tejanos were Spaniards. Were Spaniards that owned slaves. And that's why they allied themselves to the Anglos that wanted to start the Texas Republic, because within the Texas Republic, they say they were going to continue to maintain slavery. So the Tejanos, if you want to call yourself that, which is a Caddo word, Caddo for Techas, right? It's Caddo. One of the native tribes that was here, and it goes from East Texas all the way into Oklahoma, the Caddo Ade. And some of them also have burial sites here at what you call the Alamo. It's an atrocity what is celebrated here, okay? Why we're going to continue to end the march for Cesar Chavez, which is, I'm recognizing Cesar Chavez not for every single thing he did, because I don't agree with every single thing he did. The wet line is one thing I don't agree with. And if you all have any education, you're all in college, you know what the wet line is. It's where Mexicanos that were called wetbacks were met as soon as they crossed the river by Cesar Chavez family and forces, and assaulted, beaten up, and forced to go back across the river. So they would not break the strike in these ranches and farms that Cesar had strikes going against. Grape growers, orange growers. These are the things. As I learned more about Antonio Rendine used to go across the border and deal with the international unions that Mexicans had over there and paid them the wages they would earn at the farms over here so they wouldn't cross. That's the difference. Instead of assaulting, physically beating up people, he went and he paid until Cesar dried up those monies and he couldn't do that anymore, which went into the late 70s and mid 80s. And I say this because I don't agree with everything, but I do agree that something needed to be done for Mexicanos, even though Cesar was a nationalist because he only wanted to do for U.S. citizens. And now, in his name, we're fighting anti-immigration legislation. We're fighting for all workers. So it's a good, which is why I started that march in 1996. And I've told you the reasons why I want to end it at the Alamo Plaza. All this is our land, not just the west side. So to end it at the Plaza de Zacate, because that's called Milan Park, but it was called the Plaza de Zacate. My father used to tell me stories about how they used to have barrel cans with wood in it and fire, and how people would just had an open market there. They would come in with the mules carrying the stuff and sell it there and have the fires and drink beer all night and stay there. Plaza de Zacate. So that's a good area too. Ernest's idea to end it at the federal building on the 24th is a good idea as well, because hopefully he's focusing on the anti-immigration legislation, which is why he wants to end it there. I'm focusing on anti-immigration legislation and workers' rights as well. Join whichever march you want to join. But if you come with me, you're coming with the original person, the only one that's left still of the founders, still dedicated as an activist to standing up for the voiceless, for the downtrodden, and for the people that are called illegal because of their skin color. The ones that are incarcerated and deported, separated families from one another. I stand for them, and I will continue until I can't anymore. So join us March 31st for the Cesar Y. Chavez March for Justice with the original founder, Antonio Diaz. I'll be putting out flyers, so stay tuned. Tlazocamati.
¿Qué onda, carnal? Dice mi gente, la raza está abajo y tú estás indiferente. Prefieres cerrar los ojos, no vi nada. Estabas ocupado por andar en la tomada. Te gusta tirar el cruising todo el día, buscando a las mujeres como si el mundo acabaría. Pero no sabías que tú podías continuar tu educación para superarte en la vida. Hermano joven, levanta tu frente y siente el orgullo de ser un descendiente de los aztecas, los incas y los mayas. Ayúdame a pelear y vencer.